Last week Friday, the 25th of January, marked a significant day in the history of Ghana. On this day, a more than 65-year-old chieftaincy discomfort had been resolved. It was resolved by all stakeholders, relying on the selfless magnanimity of a political hero in the person of President Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo. So the story begins after the reunification of Dagomba in 1919, following its separation by the German and British partition of 1899. Following that event, the Dagomba State Council became a creature of statute when it was appointed as native authority under Ordinance No. 2 of 1932 by the Colonial Chief Commissioner. Then, afterwards in 1948, significant changes were made to the Dagomba Constitution. The principal changes allowed Egbonlana, who is the eldest son of Eyana, to become the Nam of Yendi, or to become the Yana of Yendi. The politics of Ghana's pre-independence era between Nkrumah and the opposition parties also appear to have partitioned the Yendi skin on political lines. It is believed that the Andanis were more CPP, whilst the Abudus were more UP Dankwa Buzia. This belief appears to have been entrenched by the distinguished leadership of Tolona Yakubu Tali, who was a leading figure of the opposition and who fought on the lines of the federalist argument for the Northern People's Party in 1953. Here in this BBC video, the Honorable Yakubu Tali articulates the position for federalism against Nkrumah and the CPP's position on a unitary state.
The Northern Territories were also in favor of a federal system of government to protect their region. It had been a British protectorate since the days of Queen Victoria. Their chiefs were strongly opposed to the idea of rapid independence and said they feared that the benevolent protection of the British would be replaced by domination by black men from the south.
So we sent a delegation to Beijing, and I spoke for the Northern Territories. And I told them that when the chiefs of the Northern Territories entered into treaties for protection with the British Crown, they understood it to mean not only protection from internal and external threats, but also a responsibility on the part of the British Crown to lead the people, to stand on their feet and be able to manage their own affairs. So I thought Britain had a moral obligation, to help us out of our present difficulty.
So it was around the same 1953 that the amendment to the Dagbon Constitution of 1948 was first implemented. It allowed the Bonlana, the first son of the Yana, to be made Yana himself. This occurred in 1953. However, later superior learning from the courts and from traditional authority was to the effect that only the occupants of the three gates of the Yendi skin could inherit the Yana. They were the Mion, the Savlugu, and the Karaga. Only them were eligible to occupy the Yendi skin. Nonetheless, an Abdullahi Bonlana had been selected in 1953 to be Yana. And it was in 1953 when Kwame Nkrumah and the CPP as the government were fighting the opposition over the federalist issues, and the Northern People's Party was the dominant political opinion in the Northern Territories. Just maybe, the politics of Yakubu Tali and the Northern People's Party may have influenced the ascension to the Yendi skin by Egbonlana. Then in 1969, under the NRC, Yana Mahamadou Abdullahi, another Abudu, was enskinned as the Yana. So an Abdullahi has succeeded another Abdullahi to the Yendi skin. The age-old learning that the ascension to the Yendi skin was a rotational matter between the Abudus and the Andanis appeared to have been overlooked. The pro-UP government, the government of the day, was said to have sympathies for the Abudus. So once again, just maybe, there could have been political interference in the ascension to the throne of Yana Mahamadou Abdullahi. Thus, it came as very little surprise to political and legal observers that just 2 years after Buzia's administration had been overthrown in 1972, the succeeding government, the Achampon military government, entertained a petition by the Andani family over the Yendi skin matters. In this regard, a committee was set up pursuant to Executive Instrument number 74 of 1972. The committee included the very distinguished Niama Olenu, Nanase Chibu Daku, Nana Atakra Amaniampon, and Togbe Ajatepo. The Niama Olenu's committee's verdict was damning. On the basis of its findings, the Olenu committee concluded that the enskinment of the then Yana Mahamudu Abdullahi was contrary to the Dagomba constitution because, in the first place, at the time of his election, he was not occupying a gate skin, and secondly, he had not been selected by the Committee of Four Elders. The government of Kutu Achampon accepted and implemented the findings and recommendations of the Olenu committee. Yana Mahamudu Abdullahi was therefore illegitimized by the Olenu Commission's recommendation and replaced by Yana Yakubu Andani, who became the new Yana. The Abdullahi family obviously were not very happy with this. They had to wait, however, till 1985, when the NRC Decree 299, which created Yakubu Andani's position, was repealed by the PNDC. Mahamudu Abdullahi then successfully challenged the findings of the Olenu Committee in the Court of Appeal. But before he could celebrate his victory, Yakubu Andani appealed against the decision to the Supreme Court, and in 1986, the Supreme Court, by a 7-1 ruling, legitimized Yana Yakubu Andani's enskinment. The Supreme Court's 7-1 decision generated significant interest about the Yendi skin matter all over the world. The majority opinion was read by Justice A.N.P. Soa. In the majority opinion, the Supreme Court held as follows: that the Dagomba Traditional State Council is not a creature of statute, that though on the occurrence of a vacancy, the Bonlana may, as a formality, put his candidacy, he is not the real candidate for the NAM of Yendi. The real contenders are the occupants of the gates of Mion, Savlugu, and Karaga. That the selection committee, which came into being in 1948, erred in electing Bonlana Abdullahi to the NAM in 1953. That only the sons of the Yana can succeed to the Yendi skin, not the grandsons. The NAM is succeeded by rotation between the Abudus and the Andanis. That the legislative power of states under indigenous Dagomba constitution is vested in the Yana and not the Dagomba State Council. They also added that the funeral of a legitimate Yana must be performed before the enskinment of a new Yana. That was the majority opinion delivered by E.N.P. Soa. But there was the dissenting opinion by the Venerable Justice N.Y.B. Adade. Justice Adade's minority opinion had the following highlights. 1. That the Dagomba State Council was not a creature of statute. As such, its aboriginal functions were not in any way impaired by any statute. The said council validly resolved to substitute the traditional committee of 4 with a new selection committee, which after all was only an enlargement of the old one. The resolution, he said, of 1948, as that of 1953, did not require to be gazetted to be valid. The appellant, referring to Yakubu Andani, was not selected by the only competent selection body, and therefore could not have been validly enskinned. He concluded that the selection of the respondent, being Mahamudu Abdullahi, by the selection committee was in order and according to custom. That was Justice Adade's dissenting opinion. So whilst the Supreme Court may have been divided in a big majority of 6 against a single dissenting opinion of 1, the matter still stood that there were people who were not completely convinced about this. But it would appear as though the Supreme Court decision had political connotations. For Justice Adade it was, who was the Attorney General for Prime Minister Buzia, and his opinion supported the retention of Mahamudu Abdullahi, the Abudu Yana, whereas the majority opinion led by E.N.P. Soa supported the legitimacy of the then Yana Yakubu Andani. This Supreme Court ruling on the Yendi skin dispute generated sufficient academic commentary all over the world. Professor Kofi Kumadu, a constitutional law expert writing in the University of Ghana Law Journal, had this to say about the conclusion. He said, "When the dust has settled over this litigation, It is respectfully submitted that it will become clear to all that by its decision, the majority of the Supreme Court have laid the basis for lasting peace in Dagbon. This is what Professor Kumadu said. But alas, future events indicated that Kofi Kumadu was wrong. It began in 1987 when a committee was set up by the PNDC administration for reconciliation. The Reconciliation Committee recommended that the funerals of Mahama Abdullahi be performed at the Gbewa Palace, among other things. However, this was not to be, because it is rumored that the Andani family were worried that if they allowed the Abudus into the Gbewa Palace to perform the funeral of Mahama Abdullahi, they ran the risk of having another Gbonlana, who would have been the first son of Mahama Abdullahi, to enskin himself as Yana, given that they were unhappy with the enskinment of Yakubu Andani. So the recommendations of 1987 never saw the light of day, and this tension traveled until 2002. So war broke out barely 1 year after the MPP government was sworn in on the 25th of March 2002 in Dagbon. On the 27th of March 2002, news came through that the Yana Yakubu Andani and 30 of his elders had been killed in the gruesome war that occurred in the Dagbon traditional area. All hell broke loose, and President Kufuor set up the Waku Commission to look into these matters. Later on, President appointed the Asante Hines Commission to bring a lasting resolution to the Dagbon crisis. So the 2-4 Commission had been sitting under the Kufuor administration, they sat under the Mills administration, and sat under the Mahama administration. And then came campaign 2016. It is worth noting that the New Patriotic Party had been the political loser of the crisis, given that Yana Yakubu Andani was murdered under their watch. NPP political leaders had therefore been desperate to see an end to the crisis in Dagbon. Here, candidate Akufo-Addo, as he then was, made this passionate promise as part of the 2016 campaign.
I have no agenda in Dagbon other than the peace, the unity, and the progress of Dagbon. That's the only agenda that I have. And I'm going to work with you, on the Kodba and everybody, to make sure the reconciliation and peace becomes a reality here in Dagbon.
It came as no surprise, but actually as a pleasant relief, when the Asante Hene Otunfor Setutu and his team visited Jubilee House in November 2018 to say that there was great light at the end of the tunnel in the Yendi skin disputes.
And therefore, Mr. President, we've come here to inform you. This committee took a decision and said that the funeral of Na Yakubu and Na Muhammad Abdullahi should be performed from the 14th of December to the 28th of December this year. They have a 1-week respite, and the next will be from the 4th to the 9th, another 4th to the 19th or 18th of January. Then the Andanis would also perform. On that very day, the last day, the Friday, there are 4 recognized elders who have to sit in seclusion, and then they would have to do their oracles to choose a new Yana. And that starts from the very Friday that the funeral of Na Yakubu Andani finishes. So we hopefully believe so that after the 18th, the oracles will start, and God willing, within the few days, we shall have a new Yana. And that's what I've come to present.
Following that came the big day of 25th January 2019, when a new Yana from the Andani Gate had been installed by an MPP president. So, who is to blame for the past and for all this crisis? Well, we don't know, but we know who takes the credit. For after all, high-level closed-door meetings have produced great compromises. 1, that the funeral of Mahama Abdullahi has been held. 2, that the funeral of Yakubu Andani had been held. And 3, that an Andani Yana has succeeded another Andani, and in the spirit of peace and reconciliation, no one insisted on the rotation. These are compromises for peace and a show of magnanimity for progress. How did it happen, and why did it happen? It happened because of this man. He kept his promise, he walked his talk, and he stood for peace. he said that he is neither an Abudu nor an Andani.
I am neither an Abudu nor an Andani. I am an Abudani. A person who stands for unity, reconciliation, and progress in Dagbo.
Congratulations, President Akufo-Addo. You are truly a man of peace.